All right. We will now call to order the February 18th, 2025 regular meeting of the El Segundo City Council. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
I would be delighted to. Councilmember Keldorf.
Here.
Councilmember Giroux.
Here.
Councilmember Boyles.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Baldino.
Present.
And Mayor Pimentel.
Here. Tonight we will have two opening items. The invocation will be Father Alexi Smith of St. Andrew's Russian Greek Catholic Church, followed by a presentation of the colors and Pledge of Allegiance led by Boy Scout Troop 267. Father Alexi, please join us.
Thank you, Your Honor. We are loved by an unending love. We are embraced by arms that find us even when we are hidden from ourselves. We are touched by fingers that soothe us even when we are too proud for soothing. We are counseled by voices that guide us even when we are too embittered to hear. We are loved by an unending love. We are embraced by hands that uplift us, even in the midst of a fall. We are urged on by eyes that meet us, even when we are too weak for meeting. We are loved by an unending love. Thus embraced, touched, soothed, and counseled, let ours in El Segundo be the arms, the fingers, the voices, ours the hands, the eyes, the smiles that love with an ending love this day and always. Amen.
Audience attention. Color guard advance. Color guard, prepare to post the colors. Color guard, post the colors. All those in uniform, please salute. All others, place your right hand over your heart. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. 2. Color guard salute. 2. Color guard dismissed. Audience at ease.
Thank you, Troop 267. We'll start with a special presentation for Boy Scout Troop 267 on the 100th anniversary with Councilmember Giroux.
All right. Commendation from the City of El Segundo. Whereas Boy Scout Troop 267 has been an integral part of the El Segundo community for 100 years, fostering leadership, character development, and outdoor skills among generations of young people. And whereas since its early beginnings over a century ago, Troop 267 has upheld the values of the Scout Oath and Scout Law, instilling in its members the importance of duty to God and country, service to others, and personal integrity. And whereas the dedicated Scouts, leaders, and volunteers of Troop 267 have made significant contributions to the community through service projects, environmental conservation efforts, and civic engagement. And whereas the Scouts of Troop 267 have left an enduring legacy through their commitment to service, leadership, and civic responsibility, ensuring that their contributions will continue to benefit the community for generations to come. And whereas Troop 267 continues to provide a welcoming and enriching environment that teaches teamwork, responsibility, and leadership skills, shaping future generations of community leaders. Now, therefore, the Mayor and members of the City Council of the City of El Segundo, California, do hereby recognize and commend Boy Scout Troop 267 on the occasion of its 100th anniversary, celebrating its rich history, outstanding achievements, and continued service to our city. The City of El Segundo expresses its deepest gratitude to the Scouts, leaders, parents, and supporters who have contributed to Troop 267's success and impact over the past century.
This commendation will be accepted by Senior Patrol Leader Robert Benvenu.
Okay, I'm gonna stay with the first one, and then you'll be free to come up here and I'll ask the boys to stay. All right, great. All right, I wanna make sure I see all the young faces. He's the mayor, he took over. My executive order.
All right.
Very good, very good. All right, all right. Sounds good in there. Okay. There we go, there we go. Okay. Very good. Okay, do I see everybody's face? Councilmember Kilgore, I'm sorry, Mike, can you move this way a little bit? Yeah, we want to get you in that shot. Okay, here we go. And a couple photos, guys. Couple more. Make sure everybody's smiling, not blinking. Okay, thank you so much. Wait. Parents. One more.
The microphone is yours if you'd like it. I think he's got something to say. I like that.
Senior Patrol Leader, the floor is yours.
I'm very honored to be accepting this. This troop has grown an immense amount in the past few years that I've been here, and I'm hoping that our troop can go on for another 100 more years. Thank you very much.
Hey, when's your celebration?
Our celebration is March 1st, Saturday, March 1st, at the Scout House.
At the Scout House?
Yes.
Outstanding. Thank you very much.
I do not know that.
Noon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, do we have any public communication today?
We do indeed. We have 3.
3? Are any of them on agendized items?
No, they are not. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. One of them is. 2 of them are. Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay, why don't we do 4 minutes each then?
Okay.
Does that work?
How do I do that? What am I doing,
Who's
Lily?
first?
I'm sorry. May I please have Eric Behor. Thank you.
Thank you. Esteemed council members, my name is Eric Behor. I've been a resident of El Segundo for about 11 years now. I live at 941 Loma Vista, right behind Acacia Park. I came here about a month ago in January to bring this to the council's attention. Last year, we submitted a traffic safety request for the installation of a stop sign for north-south traffic at the intersection of Loma Vista and Acacia. Going and working with the city, who's been really great and open in terms of the communication, which we appreciate. It's come to the determination that the stop sign is not warranted based upon some criteria, which is somewhat subjective in manner. So I'm here today to ask the council members, you guys as the leaders of the city, to for some consideration in approving the stop sign request at this intersection. The visibility is very bad at this intersection at all sides. I have some pictures here. I also emailed them to you guys this morning. And you can see based upon the width of the street as well as the amount of cars that are parked that you have very little visibility for cross traffic and for making left turns. With that being said, again, we'd like to request consideration for this. We think it's a common sense decision to make for the safety of the residents and the neighbors of the park. We get a high volume of kids that frequent the park. It's a great park, which we really appreciate. And you know, we're concerned about the safety, you know, for those that live there and visit. So we appreciate the consideration. Similar to what other intersections in the city may have gotten. I know a stop sign was recently installed at Whiting and Pine last year. May have gotten some consideration. So would just respectfully ask that you guys consider this as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Behor.
Thank you. Wait a minute. Uh-oh, what do I do? Julie Rockefort? Oh, no, I'm good. Good. Hello, members of the council. I'm Julie Rochefort, and this is
Kathy Wiley.
we are volunteers with Friends of the Library, and something has come to our attention that we just want to make sure, we're hoping it's a big misunderstanding, to be honest. We've been very blessed with the library staff that is so talented and knowledgeable and inventive at the library and at Rec Park. The citizens of our town have enjoyed music, art demonstrations, authors' fairs, and fitness classes, just to mention just a few. The city is now requiring the staff to obtain the following information from anyone volunteering for a service or being a vendor for a service. These things I'm going to list. They must fill out 3 forms: a workers' compensation form, a service agreement, which is several pages long, and a W-9. Now, on the service agreement, it asks for their social security number, and on the W-9, it asks for their social security number. They must also provide a copy of their driver's license or valid ID, an invoice for the services rendered to the city, information for an application for a 1-day El Segundo business license, which again gives their social security number, a copy of auto insurance, which I believe is on the agenda for tonight, and this proof of auto insurance must show a $100,000 to $300,000 coverage per occurrence required, and if the person does not have auto insurance, they have to show the insurance for the hired vehicle or Uber or whatever they took. Now, I don't know about the bus, but the insurance must also list that there's no limits no less than $1 million per accident for body injury and property damage. So what this means is if I volunteer, which if I have the talent, to go to Library Park and do a Tai Chi class for no money, and I walk there, I still have to have all these things. So I would really like to, maybe this is just a big misunderstanding, but it's doesn't meet the common sense test. So I would really like you to think about this. What does this say for our city? We're a great city.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rochefort.
Thank you. Penny Finders?
Thanks.
Athletics. It's actually Finders, but it's okay. Everybody gets it wrong. Esteemed members of the council, thank you for, I just wanted to bring something to your attention, kind of in follow-up to what that nice lady had just mentioned. I'm here also as a instructor, a contract instructor in the city. Hi, Lance. Lance knows me because I'm a pickleball instructor. You should all be playing pickleball. And I know it's ironic that I'm standing here with a arm in a brace. This was a self-inflicted tennis injury, not pickleball. But I wanted to bring to your attention that I understand there's this sort of requirement now this year to ask us to have additional auto insurance in order to make sure that the city isn't liable for anything that might happen getting to and from wherever we're coming from. I live a quarter of a mile from the park. I could walk, but I would like not to have to. And so I looked into it, and it's going to cost me an additional $1,886 annually to increase my personal liability from the $200,000 that I normally have to the $1 million that's being requested. On top of that, I know B10, the agenda item, is considering a waiver for some people, which I think is great because, to their point, I think that some people should definitely be waived this amount. But one of the criteria is that if they are low risk, which I'm not quite sure how you determine that in what they're doing, and then you earn less than $15,000 a year. I don't know if that's pre or post tax. Unfortunately, I've spent the last year building up the pickleball program in El Segundo such that I have max participation. Just to give you a quick idea, Tuesday mornings, 40 ladies, and there's a wait list every Tuesday morning. Saturdays, there's a 3 series of beginners clinics, 16 participants. I've got it up to max, and there's a wait list, and I run live balls. So, unfortunately, I'm bringing in, ballpark, about $60,000 to the city. Obviously, you're paying me, but not that amount. But I am going to go over the $15,000 a year, so I'm going to be ineligible for that waiver. So I just wondered if you would, in considering that agenda item, also consider a case-by-case basis for the likes of someone like me, who I've really done a lot of effort to build the program, only to now find myself in a bit of a quandary, shot myself in the foot, if you will. Again, self-inflicted injury, but I don't want to have to abandon ship and have to go teach elsewhere. I really love the community. I've really got, I've got over 200 students, I should say, and so I would just like you to consider that on top of what you're considering as far as B10. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Fenders. Council comments? Seeing none. City Manager, comments?
Yes, regarding, thank you, Mayor. Regarding the Eric Bayer item, the stop sign in Loma Vista and Acacia, I'd like to spend some time meeting with our Public Works Director to discuss the warrant report that was prepared for that before suggesting anything coming back to council. And then on the 2 speakers regarding the insurance requirements for vendors and contractors, as they spoke, it is on the agenda tonight for further discussion.
Thank you. I'd say regarding stop signs, what has come up on the one on Sycamore that we did a few years ago and is slightly relevant to Loma Vista is outside of the warrants, the sight lines, because the size of the vehicles tend to be the issue. So while the measurements may impact the warrant, it's the ability to see over the larger vehicles that exist. So I'd ask that you factor that in as we did in East Sycamore. And with that, I will entertain a procedural motion to read all ordinances on the agenda by title only.
Well, so moved.
Second.
Second, Giroux. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? No, passed 5-0. All right, on to consent. Any pulls? Whoa. All right, I'll entertain a motion to...
Well, let's pull item 10, right? Isn't that the waiver that we just had public comment about? So,
If you would like to.
I would.
Very well, we will pull item 10. I will entertain a motion to approve items 2 through 11 on the consent agenda.
So moved.
Baldino will second.
Baldino says that's Giroux on the first, Baldino second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Oh, okay, that passes. Item 10, over to you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, questions for staff? Mr. George. Oh, Rebecca? You walking up. The city has insurance to protect itself from liabilities, auto accidents, anything that happens, correct?
Yes, the City of El Segundo is a member of a risk pool called ICRMA, Independent Cities Risk Management Authority. It's a group of 13 agency members who pool all their resources to be able to purchase insurance to protect their agencies from all the things you just mentioned.
And in order to maintain that policy, we have to meet certain requirements placed upon us by the insurance company, as far as paperwork and keeping track of who is and not working either as a contractor or full-time employee.
Well, we want to be a good participant in the risk pool, and we don't want to make ourselves more risky than somebody else. But we do have a city council resolution. It's resolution 4813 that was approved that talks about contracts with the city and defines them as low, medium, and high risk. So waivers for low risk things are up to the risk manager. Medium risk, the risk manager can make a recommendation to the city manager. All of these are in conjunction with the city attorney's office. High risk items can only be waived by taking them to the city council per the resolution. So the item tonight, staff has been working on this for quite a few months. We have several instructor contracts that were expiring December 31st of last year. We entered into extensions with these instructors. Those extensions are expiring at the end of this month. And one of the main things that was brought up was the need for commercial auto insurance to protect the instructor traveling to and from wherever they live in the course and scope of providing services for the city. And so in the past, since we've just found a risk manager through a recruitment process the last year, we've been using the ICRMA Rent a Risk Manager program. And so our Rent a Risk Manager has been reviewing and approving the certificates of insurance. And that's when it came to light that some of these were not approved with commercial auto. They were approved with personal auto, but personal auto does not cover, expressly does not cover someone who's a contract instructor who's driving to and from the city.
So the idea of this waiver exemption program is that the city can evaluate individually the contract services providers and decide if it's, makes sense to waive the formal requirements that are required by our risk management insurance program.
Yes, and we have done an analysis of the contracts that are the individual contract instructors, and we put them into low and medium risk. And so we have 26 that are in low risk, 11 at medium. Of the low risk, there's only 4 that were identified as exceeding the $15,000 threshold. One of those was only $16,000, so maybe that instructor could just reduce their services a little bit to fall under and get the waiver. So that leaves us with 3 low-risk contract instructors who would not fall within the $15,000 threshold.
Okay. So, question. Sorry, Dr. Chris. The 15,000. Where does that come from? The risk management pool, or is that us?
That comes from us. We considered our contracts. We also considered that, as an example, City of Santa Monica, they have a $10,000.
I got you. I just think that risk shouldn't be predicated on dollar figure. It should be on what are they actually doing. Like if they were busing a bunch of kids back and forth to the park, I would understand that. But Ms. Finders, for example, I mean, you're literally talking about an instructor who carries a paddle around. There's no, I think we have to look at it as what are they actually performing for the city to be part of what that risk management is.
Right. So
But if I could respond to that just briefly, and what our insurance pool says is one auto accident in California, I mean, you hit somebody wrong and you're talking about hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars of liability. So they may not be traveling far, but they don't have to travel far to do a lot of damage, and so why not, particularly on a dollar contract where they're bringing in 60,000, spending $1,800 is probably good for reducing the city's risk, even if it costs the city more money to pay for that contract, because the city's SIR, self-insured retention, is $750,000. So
Okay, is there an indemnification process where the instructor can completely indemnify, or is that just still, obviously I know that basically anything that happens in this county, in this state, and most other states, you have the ability to get sued for everything you have. I get it.
If
But
they-
I'm looking at I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, if they have indemnification, that's great. If they don't have insurance, then it's worthless. That's why we're saying if you are going to be regularly driving to and from and providing services, the city needs to be protected with commercial liability because the auto won't cover it because you're engaged in a commercial activity. These are rules designed by insurance companies so that if something happens, they've got a reason to deny coverage. So I think the city is trying to keep the city of El Segundo's liability in check. It's trying to bring these contractors into conformance with what our insurance requires, but also provide flexibility for someone who just wants to do like one class and maybe is not making $15,000. So there is a process. There are procedures where you can appeal to city and say, look, I think I should get an exemption from it. And I think it's a smart process. It protects the city. It gives us some flexibility to make sure that we're not scaring off, folks who want to just come and do a 1 or 2 day event.
And one of the things I was going to point out is, and there's actually some articles about this, one of the most common mistakes people make with insurance is they assume that when they do something for commercial purposes, they're covered by their personal auto, and they're not. These people that are complaining about it, and I understand there's an additional cost, the fact is they get in an accident out there, they're not covered. The insurance company will say to them, you're not covered. You may be getting $30,000, $60,000 on a contract, but if you do hundreds of thousands of dollars of damage to somebody, they're going to come after you personally, and the insurance company's going to tell you you're not covered. So it's not just us that's not covered, they're not covered. And I would, we've tried to make that point that it's in their interest too to be covered. I mean, I would think if you're living in El Segundo and you're talking about the assets most people have here, kind of contract that's these dollars, the cost of the insurance is a good purchase, I think.
In this waiver process, though, are we indemnified by the individual? If they say, hey, they're going to accept this waiver,
No.
and then they
And I
drive
think
into a bus, is the line operator able to sue the city, or are we indemnified by the individual?
No, I mean, if they have no, as Mayor Pro Tem pointed out, we may have indemnity, but if they have no insurance, it won't be worth much to us. So we are talking about in certain instances, if it's, a minimal contract of they're doing a couple days work and there's not much there's not much of a payment by the city. Are we going to go make them spend a couple $1,000s on insurance? I mean, we waive that, but there is a risk to the city if they get into an accident that the city will be responsible. Now, somebody talked about if they walk here. Well, if they walk here, we have a form already to get a waiver. If they're not driving a car and they attest that they're not going to drive a car, we'll give them a waiver. So that's already in place. As far as all these forms, just to address that, we do get additional requirements by the state all the time. I mean, we have to do fingerprinting, the W-9, the workers' comp. I mean, a lot of these are just requirements that we have to meet, and those aren't new requirements. The thing that's really changed, if you will, although it was already a requirement, just wasn't being enforced, was the commercial auto. And that's where we put the focus, and that's really where the changes have been made.
Mark, isn't there a dollar threshold on the W-9? That's a federal mandate. I think it's
Yeah,
like
there is.
$600 or something.
I'm not sure of the dollar amount for the W-9 to do business with the city. I do know that finance requires that so they can set you up in the system to be able to pay you.
1099. Yeah, I get that. What's the medium risk category? What kind of activities fall in that?
Pickleball is a medium risk activity. That's an example. Tennis. We have 3 pickleballs, 1 tennis, a gymnastics program, soccer, skateboarding, basketball clinics and camps and referees, soccer camps. Those are all, we've classified them as medium risk. Some of those already have the commercial liability insurance, though, and some of the people who are considered low risk, they also have the commercial auto. An alternative to the commercial auto is to take your personal insurance, talk to your broker, and get an endorsement for business use on your personal. We are working, because there are some people who are low risk who have the proper insurance, commercial or the rider on it. We are compiling a list. We're reaching out to those brokers and finding out, hey, can we make a list of resources to give to the vendors that do need to get insurance or that want to get insurance?
Do we require participants? So if I'm an instructor and someone is participating, given what happened in the pickleball court, now we have an AED out there, but just as an example, are participants required to sign waivers indemnifying the city for every activity?
I believe they
Like,
should
I know
have
they're
a
not in the skate
participant
park, for
waiver
example.
with the contract
Skate
classes.
park, I don't think there's any way to enforce that as an example.
Things that aren't part of classes, then no. I mean, if they're just using our facilities, then we don't generally, but if they are part of classes or they're part of a youth league or something, they all get forms to fill out.
So if I'm an instructor, is there precedent, Mark, like, if I'm an instructor, somebody has a heart attack, is the expectation the instructor is supposed to be aware, look at someone's ashy and that they might be having, like, I'm trying to understand what the real risk is here of a medium activity instructor, and then how we're going to determine which ones get waivers and which don't.
So the crux of this is the auto insurance. That's where the concern was. And the activities that people are performing may be low risk, but it's the not having the auto insurance that's a high liability, high exposure. And so under the resolution, that's why we're coming to City Council for a waiver of the auto for people that fall into low risk and $15,000 threshold. So it's the auto that's the high exposure, high liability. It's not.
Why then are we differentiating low, medium, and high if it's really just about the driving component? That's what I understand.
It's an arbitrary line. It's true. I mean, it's you know, these are desirable programs, and we're talking about low dollars. I mean, would it be better if we had insurance from everyone? Absolutely. I mean,
So the low, I understand pickleball is now medium risk. What is low?
Okay, so low risk, so per the resolution, there's several, it's in a controlled setting, little or no public exposure to bodily injury or property damage, no highly hazardous materials, no significant excavation or confined spaces, no significant activity in the public streets, and no overhead hazards, no alcohol.
Okay, so what I'm saying, what is an activity or someone we have that falls into that? Can you just give me an example?
and I think one of the things I point out is
filmmaking
Art journaling.
is low.
Art
Hold on, I just want to make sure I understand. I know it's arbitrary. I know you're not making the rules, so I get it. I'm just trying to understand. So we're saying that a pickleball instructor is more liable to have a problem than a filmmaker driving a car in town. That's what we're saying,
No,
essentially.
the risks is there's different kinds of insurance. You're taking all these different types of things that have different risks, but they're not just required to have auto insurance. These fall into different categories. So, for instance, for general liability, some things are much lower risk than like more active type sports where there's.
But driving through the city is not.
You're right.
It doesn't make any. So basically, to me, it looks like a cash grab by somebody. Not saying us. I'm just saying that this looks like a cash grab somewhere. Because why are you sitting there saying that a film producer driving a car in the city who makes less than 15,000? It just. I know what we're saying, Mark. I know we're up against it on it, and I understand why. I'm just saying that my logical mind is having a little bit of trouble wrapping my head around it.
What we're considering is that, then I'll just leave it, but you're right. I mean, as far as the activities, they've been categorized by the activities. As far as driving, that's all considered high risk. We are arbitrarily saying if you're in this very low risk pool, which has nothing to do with driving, you just happen to be in that low risk pool, we'll waive it.
We'll have a professional risk manager on staff who can assign the risks and pool them based on their professional experience.
We do, and she just started about 3 weeks ago. She's here in the audience.
And the point of this is, though, the city can make a judgment call and allow someone who's not going to pay to get commercial insurance to still provide a service, but we're assuming that risk. And so now we have a program, we have some criteria, that they can go through that and have a process to say, yeah, how can we keep some of these smaller vendors still providing services while having some type of, regulation that covers us for any liability. So it's not fun, but I think it's smart. And I like that we're trying to get some flexibility to keep these smaller vendors providing services. So I think it's
the intention was to balance the needs of all the residents. A lot of residents are vendors and instructors that have been doing this for decades, and they support all of the programs, the Joy Around the World, those types of things, 4th of July. So we're trying to balance, the community with the risk pool and the liability to the city and to the people providing the services.
Mayor Pro Tem, your item.
If there's just any other questions, I will move approval.
The waiver of commercial auto insurance requirements for qualified city recreational park and library department contractors and vendors pursuant to City Council Resolution Number 4813.
That one, yes.
I'll second.
Giroux on the second. Baldino on the first. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? 5-0, it passes.
Thank you.
On to item 12, the Patches Program Quarterly Update. That's our proactive approach to combating homelessness in El Segundo. Who presented this item?
Yes, I believe our police chief, Saul Rodriguez,
I think Lieutenant Muir I saw back there.
or maybe Lieutenant Muir is going to do. I'm not.
Sergeant at Arms.
Chief,
There we go, the chief.
Can you give me a few minutes, or we can go to another item? The staff
Absolutely.
who's presenting thought we were going to go a little later. They'll be here in a few minutes.
No, very well.
If you don't
very
mind, my
well.
apologies.
Paul, are you okay with going on item 13? All right, we will do a quick rearrange to item 13. This is our mid-year budget and second quarter fiscal year 24-25 financial report.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and City Council members. I do have a presentation. All right. Good evening, council members. Tonight, I have a presentation for you for our second quarter financials. That's for our 6 months for the quarter, or 2 quarters worth, and also covering some mid-year adjustments from our departments. We'll have our staff recommendations and next steps for our budget process. In regards to our financial report, this really hones in and focuses generally on the general fund, but I'll also have some highlights for you for all funds as well. Regards to our general fund, we've realized $30 million, approximately $30 million during these last 6 months, or 32% of the budget. That versus our prior year, 12 months ago, was close to $29 million, or 33% of the budget. And really, it really comes down to some of the timing of receipts when we record it in our system. But also, I'll cover it in our later slides in regards to some of the sales tax. We've been seeing some fluctuations there. But overall, our top 5 revenue sources are expected to meet or exceed the budget. And lastly, on our Q3, when I come back in a couple of months, I'll provide a more in-depth picture in regards to some of the business license tax that we've received in January and February as well. Regards to our general fund revenues, as you're aware, we have a very diverse revenue source, and that really shelters us from any real big economic downturn, being that we don't heavily rely on just one revenue source. As you can see, we have various revenue sources for the general fund: sales tax, business license, TOT, property tax, and utility users tax. You also see interest and rental income that's been really beneficial for the city as interest rates continues to be high. And let me jump into this graph here, as I believe there's going to be some kind of question or conversation in regards to how we're looking when we're comparing year over year for this quarter. So I'll start from the left side, from our sales tax side, and then move over to each section to the utility user tax. With regards to sales tax, the blue line is really our current fiscal year compared to the orange line, which is the prior fiscal year. And you can see there's this delta. And there's a couple of things that's really triggering this sales tax delta. For instance, number one, during this period last year, we did have a large contribution that came in from Chevron. And that was really a one-time spike that was reflected last year that was not reflected this quarter. We also brought in Rivian sales that flowed through last fiscal year during this time, which is no longer flowing through, being that CDTFA or the state is recalculating that sales tax for us. And also gas prices were higher this time last year, so we did see that spike as well. And so overall, sales tax-wise, we budgeted $15.4 million this year, and we are on pace to collect $15.4 to upwards to $16 million. As I met with our sales tax analyst and consultant, and they've voiced that overall they look at micro, macro economics, and it seems like overall we're on pace to hit our budget by fiscal year end. Regards to business license tax, during this period, it's relatively a slow business tax as most of it comes in during the January and February months. Year over year, it's relatively flat. We did expect that to be flat, and so there was no surprise there. Regards to TOT, our transient occupancy tax, that is actually coming in about 1 to 2% higher than last year, which was expected. The occupancy rate at the hotels remained close to 90%, so that's a good sign as well. Property tax is coming in higher, and we did anticipate that 2 to 3% higher than prior year. And that's really just due to the demand for our properties here at El Segundo. Even though interest rates, mortgage rates remain high, there's still a big demand for communities and homes to be bought here in El Segundo. And lastly, utility users tax, you do see a little drop here, and it was expected as rates have plateaued over last year, but over the prior fiscal years, rates were going up, but now we've anticipated that rates were going to flatline, and which it has, and so hence we've seen more of a flat utility users tax, which we did anticipate during this fiscal year as well. I'm not going to go through each of the line items, but I just wanted to highlight for the council at the bottom of this table here, we collected $29.8 million. We budgeted $93 million, so we've collected 32% of the overall budget. And we do anticipate, as we get closer to fiscal year end, that $93 million should be either on budget or exceeding that by 2 to 3% of that anticipated revenue budget as well. Overall, for all funds, the only real highlights here is that there's certain funds, such as line 3, the transportation funds, as you can see, has collected well over what the anticipated budget was, and that's really just for Measure M grant funds that was received this fiscal year, which was for capital improvement projects from prior fiscal year, so it's really a timing. And other items that are exceeding kind of the 50% threshold is really just timing, and also one-time transfers that have occurred during the July, kind of the first 6 months of the period, hence we see a higher percentage. Moving on to general fund expenditures, we've expended $45.8 million, which is 46% of our current budget. And that's versus last year at $45 million or 47%, so well under the 50% threshold. We are continuing to see double-digit vacancy rates in various departments at 10% plus. But overall, our O&M costs, our operating and maintenance budget is on pace with the budget. Regards to expenditures per department, as you're aware, public safety has the highest expense for all the various departments, police and fire. And there's some transfers out that occurs during the first half of the year, and then also the various public works and rec park supersede those public safety departments for expenditures. Just wanted to highlight for the council at the very end, you see COVID-19 reimbursements. This is actually showing as a negative, meaning that we did get reimbursement from FEMA for a little less than $500,000 from COVID-19 monies that we post against the expenditure. Hence, it kind of resides here in the expenditure, but it's an actual check that we did receive from FEMA. And as of life to date, we've collected 1.4, I don't have the exact number, but a little less than $1.5 million in COVID-19 reimbursements from FEMA. And we have another $500,000 or so outstanding with FEMA as well. Regards to just kind of by department, how much we've collected, just going down to the bottom of the table, we spent $45.8 million. That's versus the budget of $98.9 million. So we spent 46% of the budget. Various departments, of course, are under that 50% threshold, but as you can see at the top, line 1 and 2 for police and fire, police being at 57% of the budget, and then fire at 52%. And there's really two reasons for that. Number one is both departments have expenses that come in the first half of the year, hence higher percentage. And also overtime, being that special events occur in the first kind of half of the year, regards to July, and also into the holidays as well. So we do see a higher expenditure during this period of time.
Have we received our strike team reimbursements yet?
We have not.
Okay.
Yes. That takes 6 to, I think, almost a year time period. Regards to all funds, just a quick snapshot here at the bottom here at the table. We've expended $82.7 million of the $216.5 million budget. So we're sitting at 38% expended. There are certain line items in the various funds that have exceeded or it's at close to 100%, such as line 4, debt service POBs, or line 9, the general fund liability, and then number 15, debt service funds. Those are really just one-time journal entries that we do at the beginning of the fiscal year. Hence, it's closer to that 100%, but does not exceed the budget. This slide here, Council, I do wanted to kind of go through this line by line just to kind of give you an idea. Basically, this is what do we have? What are we anticipating by the end of the fiscal year? This is staff's best estimate at this point, kind of as we go in toward the budget and the proposed budget for next year. Kind of wanted to give the council an idea of, hey, how are we going to look like at the end of this fiscal year? So let me start with the top line item here, our unassigned fund balance. This is actually audited by our auditors. We ended the fiscal year and started the beginning of the fiscal year, July 1st, at $40.7 million. And with the anticipated revenue that's going to come in during this fiscal year of $93 million, and then if we expend the expenditures that are our current expenditure budget of $98.9, we should anticipate to end the fiscal year at close to $34.7 million. Now, our fiscal policy requires us to keep 25% on reserve, which would be $24.7 million. We take the difference between what we are going to end the year at and keep the 25% reserve. We're looking at close to $10 million in a way, surplus that should remain. Now, I wanted to highlight with the council that this $10 million, of course, is predicated on what we're going to program for next year's expenditures, such as we have salaries that are going to go up regards to COLA. Our pension UAL is going to go up close to $900,000 next year. We also have the POA's new MOU negotiations that are beginning, which is going to impact that bottom line, that $10 million that I just mentioned. We also have the 10 police overhires that is not part of the budget that would eventually be proposed to be added to the budget as well. And then we are also seeing, of course, 3 to 5% inflationary costs. Yes.
Quick question on that. There's no allocation for capital improvement projects either, right?
Not at
In
the
addition
10
to the
million?
several million you mentioned, we have a shortfall of like 40 to 50 million in capital improvement projects ahead of us.
In the pipeline, yes.
Thank you.
In the 5-year forecast, yes, CIP forecast.
In the following year, we should see a UAL reduction because of the overperformance, right? We'll see that reflected lag come in the following year.
Yes and no. They are 2 years behind. So you will see a decrease, but also because that expense is kind of covered throughout the whole pool, that delta will probably be not as big as what everybody's anticipating. But we will see a readjustment in the second year.
So that everybody's going to be wrong?
Yes. I will be wrong too if you were to ask me what number we're looking at.
Thank you.
Yes. So just kind of going quickly back to this $10 million, we do have in the pipeline probably close to $4 to $5 million that are just going to naturally go up next year for expense-wise. So that difference, the remaining $5 million or so, will have to go to the CIP projects that council appropriates for funding future CIP projects as well. And as we progress through the budget process, I will bring back this table to at least give you an idea of what we're looking at bottom line and how we're looking at overall fiscally. Next section is just our mid-year adjustments. As we are now 6 months into the fiscal year, we have just a few items. This is less than 1% of our overall budget that the department heads and I met with the city manager and reviewed what the needs are. And so we're asking for a $5,000 revenue adjustment, and I'll go into more details on what these items are. On the expenditure side, we're asking for $406,294. And so the actual general fund impact is $396,294. And just to kind of highlight what these items are, on the revenue side, all funds, line 14, is that cultural development fund of $5,000. That's actually for the Friends of the Library donation that they collected, and we want to reflect that as a revenue budget. And then on the general fund, on the expenditure side, $396,000 is regards to the various items that I will go into the next slide. On the general fund side, we also have $5,000 on the other special revenue, which is our grant fund, and that's for the Cal Recycle. And lastly, it's the Cultural Development Trust Fund, $5,000. That's for that Friends of the Library, and they want to program that $5,000 that they collected for some music programming. This table here just highlights the 5 budget adjustments that staff is requesting council to consider tonight. First item is the city manager for $43,561. That's to request to add back an executive assistant position that was frozen during the budget process last year, and actually converting that position into a management analyst position. Police is also asking for 3 additional police officers. That's part of that 10 overhires, which I'll go into more details in the subsequent slides. 4 trainee budgets, and also an O&M budget for the various new officers as well. The firefighter salaries, fire department is asking for $68,711. That's actually to reflect the 2 firefighters that are now paramedics. Public Works is asking for $50,000. $45,000 is for the pump station, and $5,000 for that Cal Recycle grant. And lastly, RPL is for that $5,000 donations that the Friends of the Library received. So overall, as I mentioned, it's $406,294. Let me just go into some of the specifics to the request. For the city manager side, as I mentioned, during the budget last year, City Council froze 3 positions: the executive assistant, the planning position in community development, and lastly, the fire marshal for our fire department. At this time, city manager's office is the only department asking to unfreeze this position for the executive assistant, but also upgrade that to a management analyst position. And that additional cost is 9% higher than an executive assistant. And we're asking for 4 months of salary and benefits, which cost $43,561. Next is police department. There's quite a bit of line items to cover here, but overall, the police department is asking for the 3 officers, and that's part of that 10 overhires that council directed staff to not add to the budget, but come back to council if we were to start going into these 10 positions. So as of today, police department is at 60 sworn officers. During the budget, the council approved 62. So in April, they'll be at 60. 2 will graduate the academy, and so they'll be back up to 62. And then in May, they're going to have 3 more trainees to graduate, and they'll be at 65 come May. So what staff is asking for council is for the 2 months worth of budget for the 3 police officers for $48,645. Also, we're asking for $50,377 for 4 trainees, being that during the budget, we only budgeted 3 trainees, and in order to achieve the 10 overhires, various trainees need to be in the academy, and we need to reflect the budget for those costs. So we're asking for that 4 months of budget for the 4 trainees. And the various items below that is the various items that the police officers and the trainees require to become officers. Uniform replacement for $50,000. Training materials and supplies, mostly is that ammunition, is $15,000. The professional and technical budget, that's kind of the background check, polygraph, and psych. That's 15,000. And lastly, the contractual services, radios. What I've been told by the department is that they've been handing down the radios to the trainees, but they don't have any backup radios, and they do need these radios. And they're pretty pricey, but they do need this for the department. So they're asking for this for a total of $239,022 for budget adjustment. In the fire department, as I mentioned, there were 2 firefighters that are now paramedics, and that was not reflected in the budget. That cost is $68,711 that we want to adjust the budget to reflect. Public Works, as I mentioned, has a pump station that I know Director Sassoon has always had so much headaches with, but he's asking for additional $45,000 to cover those additional repairs, ongoing repairs that are occurring for that pump station. And also this $5,000 for Cal Recycle. We get this annual grant funds from the state, and we just didn't appropriate the expenditure. Hence, we're asking for that $5,000 of expenditure budget. And lastly, RPL is that $5,000 donation that the Friends of the Library received. And they want to reflect the revenue, but also the expenditure so that they can program some music programming for the community. With that said, that concludes the various mid-year adjustments. Staff recommendation is to approve to amend the fiscal year 24-25 budget to reflect the revised year-end revenue estimates and year-end expenditures, which were noted in the mid-year budget and second quarter fiscal year 24-25 financial report. And this is a receive and file item for the council. Oh, and last, sorry, Mayor, and last item is just regards to our budget calendar. There's a few big ticket items coming around the corner here. April 29th is our first budget study session. Budget study session 2, if we need that session, will be on May 6th. We'll also cover the CIP during that May 6th budget study session. We also have a master fee schedule coming up in April. And then lastly, we'll come to council on June 3rd for the adoption for the budget. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Director Chung. Do I have consensus to receive and file? Yes. All right.
Yes.
We have a consensus on item 1. Council discussion.
I have no objection to staff's recommendations. I do want to ask, when we have our first budget study session, I understand like our purpose here is looking 6 months and then comparing to a year. At that first budget session, instead of looking at just next year, can we extrapolate some of the cost of the new employees, the new hires, make some assumptions about vacancies no longer being at 10+%, and kind of project out what type of budget are we going to have 5-10 years down the road? Because I know we have that new software where you can plug in some different numbers and get different results. I just want to look more than a year or 2 years. Let's talk 5-10 years about, you know, the staff we have, the pension obligations we're assuming. What's that going to look like for future councils, and what can we do now to start preparing for whatever those numbers may or may not look like? So just kind of an idea of I like the presentation, I like the format. We have to make these adjustments on a regular basis, but some more long-term projections I think would be beneficial for me.
And that was part of the plan for the budget study session, to provide you the update on the long-range forecast. That's the tool that you referenced. That covers 10 years. It's always difficult to look out 10 years, even sometimes a year from now, but that will give you a better idea of what it looks like bottom line. Even Councilmember Boyles mentioned about kind of the CIP, the outstanding, what's in the pipeline, that $40-50 million. So I'll definitely come back to council during that budget study session and have that for you. Yes.
Thank you.
Councilmember Boyles.
While we're talking process, for the last, well, since 2016, really, we've been talking about a zero-based budgeting, you know, a true bottoms-up build versus using historical numbers. And I know we've talked about it as well. Are we going to get to the point this year by April 29th where we'll have a true bottoms-up build, zero-based budgeting, as opposed to just using historical as a starting point?
The way I view it, council member, is that, for instance, right now, the departments, we've started the budget process already in the background, meaning the worksheets are out, and it's really, the column that they're filling in is zero. meaning that they start off at a zero-based budget. They have to fill in regards to, for instance, my department, we have various contracts that we know they're multi-year contracts. So we know that that cost is already going to have to be embedded into the budget. Supplies, I mean, that's very small, but we do know that historically we look back and say, oh, this is how many pencils we bought, how many paper clips, so then we kind of budget that into the budget. My point is that we do a zero-based budget. It's not a formal zero-based budget, but I believe that we are doing a bottoms-up, what do we really need? What is it that we already have, such as contracts in place, and then we base that budget off of that.
Yeah, I'm referring more, I mean, 60% of our budget, if I remember correctly, is labor, salaries. So I'm not referring to the O&M, I'm referring to salaries and wages. So I'm thinking activity-based costing, how many people do we really need in each department based on what we intend to do? We're rolling out a very expensive ERP, for example. Having done that in the past, you expect to get some savings from different departments, particularly in finance and accounting, sometimes in HR, even though we have far too few people in HR. But I would really hope, because again, we've talked about this for 8 years, that we focus on zero-based budgeting at the staffing org chart level. That would be my hope, and that'll be consistent when you come back with your presentation. So I just want to make sure we're clear on the dais about that. Thank you.
Definitely.
I would concur with that, just because some of those items will be meet and confer, and we've done a very good job in HR in moving a few, onesies and twosies around to different departments. But if there are things that, if we're running at 10%, and we've run at 10% vacant at least for my entire time here, so some of those roles are woefully underserved that we need to fill, but some of them it would seem we're functioning without, and it would be good to have the department heads provide us some guidance on what the true allocation should be, and if there's things that we need to do if we're under budgeting for specific areas because we're unable to attract talent like we were in planning for that technical engineer position. A couple questions for you on the $900,000 UAL shortfall. We would plan to put that in the pension trust, correct? That $900,000. If we think when we get a new UAL allocation from CalPERS, we say we're short 900,000, then we would take part of our unassigned surplus and put it in the pension trust to allocate for that.
Yes.
Just that's a callback to our pension trust kumbaya the other day. Also, where the chief is he hiding? Because he knows I'm asking about radios. Are we? Do we really not have enough radios? Could that possibly be the case?
Good evening again. No, we've ran out of radios because we switched from analog to digital about 5 years ago. So those were all handed out when we had short staff. So as we're getting closer to that 72 number, as we hire beyond the 62, we're running out of radios. So that's what we need.
Okay, so we're short of digital radios.
Correct. There's no more analog. Analog is not used.
Sure. I was pretty sure that everyone was able to talk on the radio.
Correct. Yes,
Okay.
we do. Everybody has enough radios as it stands now with the staff that we have.
But not one more radio.
No, sir. No, sir. They've been given, like, from radios that we had that were assigned to, like, the records division to staff that really didn't need radios. We pulled all the ones we could.
That's reassuring, because $60,000 worth of radios.
Oh, I know. I know.
What else do they do?
Yeah, they're $10,000 a piece. That's the cost. That's the cost of doing business, unfortunately. For the digital radios.
And those we are on is that a 5-year or 3-year subscription for those?
I'm not sure what the
subscription service.
Yeah, it's probably like 5 years. It's
5
typically
years?
what I've seen radios as long as they last. Yeah.
Hopefully we bid that out next time. There's
Yes.
got to be a disruption in the digital radio market.
Yeah.
Very well, thank you, Chief.
You're welcome.
Okay, if you're going to pick on radios, I'm going to ask a question about the pump station maintenance. Do we have any idea how much we've spent in maintaining the pump station?
Yes, hi. The pump station 16 consists of 2 pumps and 2 engines. The pumps are already fixed. The engines are the trouble. One of the engines is, I would say, 90% done. The problem with that engine is somebody needs to babysit it. It doesn't go out automatically, and someone needs to be there at all times to make sure it comes on and it goes out like it should. The other engine is not working at all. We are working very diligently with some mechanics. As you know, these engines are very old, are extremely old. Some people say obsolete. So it's very difficult to find a mechanic that is willing to or capable of working on these engines. My hope is within the next few months we'll be able to have both engines fixed, and going forward, we have included the total redesign of the pump station. It's already under design, so we do away with the current pumps and the engines, and we're gonna have first-class, state-of-art engines and pumps that work with electricity, not with gas, and get rid of these ancient engines. That's what the idea is, and at this time, this design is underway. It's almost 30–40% done.
And this would be part of a phase 2 or 3 CIP?
Yeah, it is included in the upcoming CIP. Unfortunately, we were hoping that FEMA would pay for that. We met with FEMA, and they made it very clear that the best we can hope for is to get reimbursement for the repairs of the pumps and the engines, and made it very clear that we were not gonna be able to depend on FEMA for a new pump station. I personally, along with the fire chief, met with them, and they made it very, very clear that that is not gonna happen.
Thank you. Thanks, Elias. I know that pump is the bane of your existence.
Yeah, and the good news is the recent rain that we had, one of the pumps, both pumps were working with one engine, but we were keeping an eye. So, we're gonna wait till both engines hopefully will be repaired soon.
And we think this will buy us enough time.
Yes. Once we get these engines, we'll have enough time for the implementation of the permanent replacement of what we have with state-of-art pumps and engines.
Thank you.
Sure.
Further council comments, questions? Madam Clerk, can we take all of these items together, 2 through 5? Would anyone like to move approval for items 2 through 5? The amendment of the Cultural Development Fund revenues, the amendment of the General Fund appropriations, the amendment of the other special revenue appropriations, and the amendment of the Cultural Development Trust Fund appropriations.
Boyle, so moved.
I'll second.
Keldorf, second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? 0. Passes 5-0.
Thank you.
All right, we will go back in time. Thank you, Director Chung. We'll go back in time to Chief Rodriguez. You ready for?
Staff is here. I want to let them do it. It's going to be Lieutenant Muir and Sergeant Sanchez providing the update.
Thanks, Chief. Good evening, Mayor Pimentel, Mayor Pro Tem Baldino, esteemed council members. We're very excited to give you our quarterly update on PATCHES. Again, PATCHES stands for Proactive Approach to Combating Homelessness in El Segundo, and I think this program's already seen some success. We've entered our 6th month. Now we're into the 7th month, and I have my partner here, Sergeant Anthony Sanchez, that is going to be presenting to you tonight. Now, Sergeant Sanchez was with us from the start. He's been doing the lion's share of the work, and I'm excited that he's here to give you the update. Sergeant Sanchez?
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and City Council members. Thank you for allowing me to be here. I'm Sergeant Anthony Sanchez, and I just want to give you guys, excited to give you guys an update on the PATCHES program. So the PATCHES program has been active for 6 months. The PATCHES team consists of members from several city departments. The team meets each month to collaborate and identify solutions for issues related to homelessness. So the police department. So I'm going to go into the calls for service related to homelessness. So in October, we had 263 calls out of 2,932 total calls. That's 8% of call volume, 8 calls per day average. In November, we had 250 calls out of 2,693 calls, total calls. That's 7% of call volume, 7 calls per day average. And then December, we had 202 calls out of 2,548 total calls, 60% calls volume, and 8 calls per day average. In January, we had 126 calls. That's out of 2,545 total at 4% call volume, 4 calls per day average. And I just want to speak to a little bit about this. So if you guys didn't know, for us to document a homeless call, either officers have to go over there and say, hey, it's homeless or transient related, or dispatch, when they get the call, have to document that it's homeless or transient related. If they don't, it doesn't reflect these numbers. So we're thinking that just based on call volume and calls of service, we think that this is not an accurate reflection to the current numbers of calls and homeless that we respond to. So I just at least wanted to put that out there. So our police department is also conducting the host detail. It's a grant-funded detail through LA County. And so it's a homeless outreach detail that we, as officers, go out, 2 officers usually on a shift. They go out, it's all grant-funded overtime, and they go out and offer people resources. During this quarter, we've done 13 details with over 75 individuals contacted and offered resources. 3 individuals were transported to shelters during those details. Along with the Patches team, we also created a Patches engagement team, which consists of 5 officers and myself, a sergeant. We go out and we do proactive enforcement, offer resources to people experiencing homelessness as well. We also did a homeless count, October 28th, 2024. During our homeless count, which is different than LAHSA's homeless count, because we actually go out there, contact individuals, offer them resources as well, and try to get them the help they need. We contact 31 individuals on that day alone, and we offer them resources. We also conduct, like I said, proactive details. During this quarter, we conducted 5 of them. During those details, we contact 38 individuals during these proactive details. Usually that consists of me and my group team, depending on how many officers we have that day, going out and either for about 4 or 5 hours, going out contacting people experiencing homelessness. If they're engaged in any type of criminal activity, we also address that as well.
Those are all unsheltered homeless?
Yes.
38 independent encounters, different individuals?
Yes.
Okay.
And then enforcement was conducted during these details, which led to citations and arrests. So I want to speak on this in regards to like the city attorney's office and the major change that we had in regards to one of our ordinances recently. So the city attorney's office drafted an ordinance updating the El Segundo Municipal Code to ensure consistency with the U.S. Supreme Court's June 2024 Grants Pass versus Johnson decision. And then as well, the city council adopted that ordinance, and then it went into effect October 17, 2024. This has had a major influence as what we as law enforcement can go out there and actually do in regards to contacting individuals experiencing homeless. Before, if somebody experienced homelessness, when we contact them, if they didn't want to talk to us, they could just walk away and leave. We couldn't get their information, offer them resources. With this new municipal code, we're able to at least detain them, gather their information. We don't always conduct enforcement. Our goal is usually to get them the resources they need, but this at least gives us the ability to detain them and talk to them. So we've been in Patches engagement team enforcing anti-camping ordinance. Like I said, it gives us the opportunity to speak with individuals experiencing homelessness and connect them with resources. What we've been seeing, though, is a lot of individuals are resource resistant. So even though we're able to contact them, talk to them, they don't want our help. So they decline resources, and we either, like I said, we advise them of our new municipal code, and they usually will gather their stuff and move along. So it's had an effect in that way as well, because it's had given us the ability to contact people. All right. So I wanted to talk about two specific significant arrests our engagement team has had and with these ordinances. So on November 6, 2024, the Patches engagement team made an arrest of a subject for active warrant. The warrant was actually an El Segundo case for a battery that he had. We made contact with him on the sole basis he was sleeping, lying in public. So the municipal code, and then we obviously running his name, we learned he had that active warrant. And that also led to a violent felony arrest crime because he became violent, became resistant. We were still able to safely take him in custody, but this shows how the ordinance at least gives us the ability to talk to these individuals, identify them, and if they're engaging any other type of criminal activity, we get the ability to arrest them for that. Another one is January 30th, 2025. We made an arrest of a subject in possession of drugs for sale. This all was initiated by another subject just sleeping underneath a blanket in public. Per the ordinance, we're able to make contact with him, get his information, which led to officers being able to search him, and they found a large quantity of methamphetamine for sale. So it was another arrest that was based on just our ordinance alone. So as you see, it's not it's criminal where criminal behaviors be able to be targeted based on the ordinance. So I want to speak on our partnerships with Harbor Interfaith. Results of El Segundo Police Department's coordination with Harbor Interfaith. We've contacted 18 individuals off the street, 13 into a shelter or housing program, and 3 reunified with family members. 2 military veterans into the VA, and then out of those 18 individuals, only 4 have returned to living on the street. So obviously for our city size, we think this is a major win, being able to connect with Harbor Interfaith and get 18 individuals into housing, and only 4 of them have returned back to the streets and back to our city. We're also expanding our partnerships. So we're expanding our partnerships to work with LAHSA, Los Angeles Homeless Service Authority. What is big about this is, if you guys didn't know, Harbor Interfaith, they only work from Monday through Friday. LAHSA has a weekend team. So if we contact somebody on the weekend who's interested in resources, we can reach out to them, and they're able to come out, talk to the person, and get that person resources immediately. What we see oftentimes is if we have to wait and try to get that person resources another day, they might not want resources anymore, and they might be resistant. So this is a big win for our team. So our team that's going to be coming to El Segundo on Friday and Sunday between 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. And then they also offer additional resources. They have lahop.org. So it's an online portal that anyone can utilize to connect homeless individuals with resources. So an officer can go on there, a citizen can go on there, they can document where the homeless individual is, what they look like, all this kind of stuff. And then in 48 hours, members of LAHSA will come out and try to make contact with them. They usually do first attempt within 24 hours, but then they'll try again a second attempt in 48 hours. So that's big as well. And they also have additional housing options. What we've run into with Harbor Interfaith is their scope could be a little limited. LAHSA opens up more resources for getting people into housing. So I'll let Lieutenant Muir talk about one of our success stories.
Thanks, Anthony. I just wanted to touch on an incident that just happened 2 weeks ago that I think is important for you to know, because it really highlights the collaborative effort that Patch's program really is. It started 2 weeks ago. My partner, Lieutenant Atkinson, and I were working a host detail. Patrol got a call to an individual that was living in their vehicle in a hotel parking lot. Now, that individual had been living in the vehicle for several days. The hotel security was getting ready to not only evict that individual, but if they gave her to the end of the day, or they were going to impound her car. That would put not only her on the street, and it would get rid of her, essentially her house. The vehicle was inoperable. So what we didn't know at the time, she had been in a collision earlier in the week. She had refused to get out of her car, caused some disruption for our patrol officers. She ended up backing up traffic. They ended up having to tow her vehicle. They towed it to the parking lot, and there it sat for about a week. Finally, hotel staff were fed up. They were going to impound the vehicle. We went over. We were able to talk to her. We were able to kind of diagnose what the issue was and troubleshoot. We ended up reaching out to our city mechanic. I can't say enough good things about Gilbert Rivera. He came out. This is where the collaboration really works. Not just the PD going out, but really every facet of the city, all city members putting their heads together and working together. Gil was able to come out, diagnose, and he wasn't able to get the car started and running, but figured out it was the starter. We called Van Lingen, our tow company. They did a courtesy tow of this vehicle over to a local repair shop. The local repair shop confirmed it was a starter. They did the repairs. I can't say enough good things about South Bay COG, and it's not just because my friend Ronson Chu is here. He does such a great job with all of the South Bay cities and homelessness, but they are an extraordinary partner. They assisted or are working on assisting us with reimbursing the work that we did on that vehicle. The best part of the story is this: Harbor Interfaith and our coordinator, Valerie Campos, was with us every step of the way through this process.
and made sure that we weren't just going to repair a vehicle and that was the end of that. She made sure that she was working with this individual to get her off the street permanently. She made a deal to bring her to Safe Parking in Torrance. Safe Parking in Torrance is another grant-funded resource. They are a parking lot that during the night, they have security teams, outreach workers, coordinators, social workers, and restrooms and facilities for individuals living in their vehicle. The important part is they don't just stay in their vehicle and then leave. They continue to work with this individual with the goal of getting them off the street into permanent residence. And 2 weeks later, the individual is still in that program. I think this shows that when we work together as a city, and not just the Patches team, but businesses, residents, visitors, everyone working together, we can see some success. And 18 individuals off the street so far out of 7 months of the Patches program working. And 14 of those individuals are still in programs. I think that's huge. I want to get into data collection and analysis. And as I do this, I want to give a big shout out to our city's special projects administrator, Marizan Ramos. She put this program together using Monday.com. This is the Patches database. The Patches database, essentially any officer can use their department-issued cell phone to enter information on any individual experiencing homelessness into the database. And then we can later, as a team, look at the database and check the metrics, check the numbers, see how many people are we contacting, how many people are accepting resources, how many people are refusing resources, and we can use those numbers to make the program better and to look at other resources that might be out there as well. Every officer has a department-issued phone when they get called out either on a patrol call or they're out doing host detail or the Patches engagement team. They enter all the information, name, personal information, and also pictures, and enter this information into the database. What's best about this is if the individual is experiencing mental illness, they can check the box that for Department of Mental Health. And our licensed clinician will automatically get an email with all this person's information, their picture, and everything about this individual so that they can continue offering resources and getting this individual help. Same goes for Harbor Interfaith as well. You can click a box. As soon as they send it, not only the information uploads into the database, but an email is automatically sent to Valerie Campos and Neil Glasgow from Harbor Interface so they can continue the progress and continue to get this individual help. The online database gives us an opportunity to check what's working, what isn't working, how many individuals are being contacted per month, per day, and also how many of those contacts are of the same individual. Are we contacting the same 5 or 6 people over and over and over again, or are these new people coming in? I also want to mention El Segundo Connect. It's up and running. It gives our community members the ability to report on quality of life issues. I can't say enough good things about our IT department and Director Jose Calderon, who got this up and running. And so far, we've received 26 of these El Segundo Connect reports regarding homelessness. They go right to the Patches team and PD supervision. Once we receive these El Segundo Connect reports, we can either send an officer out there. We might be able to just, if it calls for it, we can just send that information over to Neil and Valerie at Harbor Interfaith, and they can send out, they can either come or they can kind of identify whatever resources are needed to solve this issue. I also want to just give a kind of a glimpse at the future and identify some of the future goals. So LAHSA, the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, their homeless count, their yearly homeless count is happening this Thursday. The PD's participating. So myself and another of our Patches engagement team are going to be out there with the 10 individuals, volunteers from the community. And unlike our count, and this count, we're just observing and reporting, basically looking at individuals and keeping a tally. At the end of the day, this all goes back to LAHSA, and they compile all this information from the county. This is something I'm very excited about. So we received a call from the DA's office task force on homelessness last week. They have a presentation, they have a meeting coming up with their task force on February 26th. They asked us, they had heard about our program. And so our program is run, as you know, by Deputy City Manager Barbara Voss, Deputy City Manager, myself, and Chief, I think you're going as well, Sergeant Sanchez. We're all going to go down and give a presentation of our Little Cities Patches program and what's working in El Segundo. We're also continuing the public education campaign, so I think it's important to get the word out for El Segundo Connect. I think it's also important to educate the members of the community, residents, business owners, on what they can do, what they should do if they see someone experiencing homelessness, and what's the best way to react. Again, El Segundo Connect is a fantastic resource, but I can't stress enough, if the individual appears to pose an active threat to public safety, if the person raises some sort of suspicion, just call the police. That's the best way to make sure that everyone is safe. There are other ways to, so we're constantly reevaluating and finding the best practices. One thing we noted that since we started the program, it seems like at a certain point of the day, all the beds are full at all the local shelters, and we don't have an additional resource to get someone help. If we contact someone at 2, and we've had this happen several times, we meet someone, we offer resources, they say, yes, we're willing to go. And it's my experience, if someone says, yes, we're willing to go, we have a limited amount of time to take them up on that. Often we'll call around and none of the beds are available, and that's kind of our one chance to get this person off the street. So we're looking at identifying other ways, that other resources, other options that are out there to get after-hours help. And LASA is going to be one of those big helps. We're also looking at enhancing our relationships with other homeless outreach programs. Again, I think our program is working, but what I don't want to do is just push our issues into other cities, and I don't want other cities to be pushing their issues into our city. We need to be working together. Anthony and I have gone and met with the outreach programs in Hawthorne, Redondo Beach. We're continuing to work with LAXPD, all of our surrounding cities, to make sure that this is a true collaboration, that we are not just working in a vacuum, but we are all working together. If LAPD and park rangers are cleaning up the encampments just north of us, I want to make sure we're down on the beach with them to make sure that we're all working together as a partnership. And again, we're going to continue with our regular meetings, coordinating that outreach, and continue with encampment cleanup. So we have one scheduled for within the next couple days in the vacant area between, this is the vacant area that Honeywell and Mar Ventures co-own between the Point and Plaza. There is an encampment there, and Mar Ventures is actually working to get that encampment cleaned up. We're going to be out there to make sure that everything runs safely and smoothly as well. And with that, I'll end the presentation and open up to any questions you might have of me, Anthony, or Chief of Police.
Council questions, comments?
Or the true boss of the Patches program,
This question
Deputy
is
City
for
Manager
Barbara Voss
Barbara Voss.
specifically. No, I'm just kidding. It's for anyone. Of the 100 that are in the database, roughly, 100, how many are, like you mentioned in the last quarter's results, but how many of those 100 are no longer with us, so to speak? I bring it up because, you know, we've talked to the tenant about the 3 or 4 that we see on a regular basis. Like 2016, when I did a ride-along with Marco, when he was Marco Lemus, the homeless liaison, there's a woman with blonde hair on PCH that we went and spoke to on a blanket. And I just noticed the other day she's back. And I know she gets a check, she goes to Vegas, she comes back here when she spent her money. So we have these chronic homeless people that are, one that was a former resident, or still is a resident technically.
Yes.
Another that carry shopping bags up and down from Grand Avenue, from the beach, the jetty, and up. You know what I'm talking about specifically.
Yes.
When I see those individuals, I can't help but think, what else can we be doing? I know they don't necessarily want the help, but is there anything else that we can be doing? I noticed, for example, Starbucks' new CEO, they now have a new policy, no homeless, no loitering in their stores. I think that's great because a couple of those people I mentioned would hang out in the Starbucks on Grand and Eucalyptus on a regular. But is there anything else we can do to help those folks? And it's a two-part question, but going back to the 100 or so, do we know how many are off of the streets, like permanently or somewhat permanently, of the 100 we've encountered?
So for us, again, 18 of those individuals that we were able to get into shelters since the program started, 4 of them are back out on the street. One of them is one of the individuals that is chronically homeless in our city.
So does that mean that then there are like 82 that just are refusing our help?
And no, not necessarily. So we probably have between 5 and 10 individuals that you will see repeatedly. And they are service resistant, and that doesn't mean we're not persistent, and that doesn't mean we give up. We constantly go back on every host detail. We contact the individuals that you just mentioned. We contact them every time. And there might be one moment of clarity, because some individuals are experiencing mental health issues. Some have addiction issues. There may be that moment of clarity where they're willing to accept help. Well, that's our one opportunity, and we want to make sure that we're there at that moment. But individuals, service resistant is a term that we've come to realize is a very true thing. There are individuals that this is their home, and this is what they're used to, and it's going to be very difficult for us to say something that will get them, to convince them to get off the street. However, as we are able to use the new municipal code as leverage, again, this is all through the lens of compassion, but there also needs to be consequences. If someone's committing a crime, if someone's committing a municipal code violation, that might be the leverage that we use to get that individual to accept resources, to accept help. The future I see it is if we're arresting an individual and bringing them to be booked in at jail, when they're being released with a ticket, they're meeting with a coordinator as they're walking out of the jail, and hopefully that's their rock bottom. Realistically, it might not be. We might have to arrest this individual 20 times. We might have to contact them 100 times. But persistence, to me, is the key. And long-term shelter is the answer. And I don't think getting them off the street for 2 days and then them being right back down, that's a short-term win. But I think the long-term goal for us is long-term residence in a program where they're getting assistance. And you asked, what can everyone do? Again, that's where El Segundo Connect comes in, because we have a select number of officers that are out there on the street, but the community is enormous. Everyone's got eyes and ears and a phone. You can just upload the information right to El Segundo Connect, and that gives us real-time information on where an individual is so that we can go out and get them help or direct resources to that person. And I think this truly is going to be a collaborative effort. And without residents being involved, businesses being involved, I like that Starbucks now has that policy. I think that's where the public education campaign comes in so that all of our businesses are doing something similar.
Further council comments, questions?
No, just thank you. This was a great report. Your numbers, I think, speak for themselves, and you should be proud of what you've accomplished. Thanks so much for the report.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Very well. Consensus to receive and file?
Yes.
It is received and filed. Thank you, Lieutenant.
Thank you.
All right. Director Allen, you have the next two, items 14 and 15. First, professional services agreement with MIG in an amount not to exceed $887,479 to update the El Segundo General Plan land use element, followed by the discussion and consideration of a building permit fee, development impact fee deferral program.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. Before you tonight, I'm glad we went after the mid-year budget adoption because we do have additional appropriation requests. But before you tonight is the consideration of a contract award with MIG, as just stated, in an amount not to exceed $887,479. If the council recalls, we did budget $800,000 for this in anticipation of receiving proposals in the range of $600,000 to $1.2 million. And so we did receive several proposals within that range, but we did budget specifically for $800,000, hoping that we'd land somewhere in there. The reason why we're going to add, or we're requesting to add the roughly $87,000 is we're asking for, and I'll get into this a little bit later, a 10% contingency to allow staff to make some discretionary decisions with council if needed. But as we move through the process, based on our past experience through the Downtown Specific Plan, the Smoky Hollow Specific Plan, we learned that when we committed to a specific community outreach campaign, it didn't exactly work, but we were locked into a contract arrangement without amending the contract. We're sort of locked into the engagement strategy. And so we're asking for a 10% contingency to allow us the flexibility to choose from a menu of outreach strategies, which I'll show you. And there's several other options to choose from as well, which we would likely come back to council at a later date to seek guidance on. So tonight I'll go over a little bit of the background, some of the timeline, and then the proposal itself, rather brief. And I'm thankful to be joined by the consultants tonight, but I'm also, really want to take the time to highlight the contribution of the community development staff, Agnes, Eduardo, Paul, as well as the economic development staff, Christina Ravelis, and our Chief Rodriguez, who also helped intimately in this selection process. General plans are required by state law. There's several elements that are required by state law. The one we're most familiar with is the housing element. We've gone through a fair amount of discussions regarding the housing element, but probably the most popular element, or the one that we rely on the most, is the land use element, at least in community development. And the land use element in El Segundo was last updated in 1992. And so we've found that if you look at its existing conditions, its projections, as it relates to population, demographics, economic information, it's all severely outdated. It's relatively old, and so it's definitely time to update this document. Generally, land use elements, or general plans in particular, are supposed to be updated every 20 or so years, and so we are long past due. There's also other elements that are long past due, the transportation element, the open space element, public safety element, but the land use element essentially drives much of the discussion that will trickle down to future dates, or we'll come back to the council and look to update those other elements. The land use element specifically is essentially a blueprint for the development across town. It weighs several competing interests in the community, from addressing where does residential go, industrial, commercial, but really it's intended to identify a community vision. What do we want El Segundo to look like in 20 years from now? Develop that vision and develop corresponding policies, programs, code amendments, different efforts that the city can take to make that vision a reality in 20 years. When we pushed out the RFP, we started this process in May of last year, where we brought the RFP to council to get your blessing to issue the RFP. Now, over the last several months, we've gone through a pretty rigorous review process. There was a two-step, first, just the general RFP, or the proposal evaluation, which was a committee amongst staff, and then an interview panel of the top 5. We received 8 proposals total, interviewed the top 5, and wound up with MIG as our top recommendation. And then we worked with MIG to right-size the scope to achieve the product that we wanted to see, as well as within the dollar range that staff felt comfortable bringing to council tonight. So the first round, as I just mentioned, included an evaluation of these 5 main criteria: general project understanding, the proposed scope, the qualifications overall, references that they had done, that reference checks with cities and municipalities that they'd worked with in the past, and the overall implementation schedule, whether or not it was in alignment with what we were looking at. The round 2 interview was a full hour of a presentation and then Q&A with staff, and the 5 prompts there was demonstrating the general project understanding and their overall project vision, and specifically related to their strategies to address land use in El Segundo in our unique sort of configuration, as well as a branding and economic development strategy and any other innovative proprietary information, tools, software that they might bring to the table. And then just the overall project management. One of the big key factors here is the amount of hours allocated by senior leadership in their proposal. And one of the things that did stand out with MIG was a plethora of hours at a higher management level that are allocated and dedicated to this project, far and above and beyond the other proposals. I sort of reviewed some of this. 8 total proposals, 5 consultants were selected for the interview phase. We are asking for the roughly just a little bit more than 87,000 to give staff that 10% contingency. If staff feels more comfortable having us come back to council when we get to that decision-making process, we're happy to schedule that as well. But we are proposing that 10% contingency to be spent on some of the optional items that I'll discuss later. Overall, there's several elements that will go into the general plan update, the land use element update. The first couple phases, we'll look at just sort of a summary of existing conditions, economic conditions, demographics, development patterns. Along this, the community engagement will initiate and will carry throughout the entire process, but that's where the community vision will come into play. After that, then we'll go into the land use concepts and alternative development. So we will explore the different development patterns, density, development types, land uses that will be proposed as part of the revised updated land use element. And of course, the environmental will then kick off, and then the final recommendation for the final alternative will be selected amongst the Planning Commission, Council, and this Technical Advisory Committee that I'll recommend. I'm just gonna skip these 3 because I sort of went through that. The Technical Advisory Committee is essentially a best practice. I've gone through 3 other general plan land use element updates, and not every one of them implemented this strategy, but have found that the Technical Advisory Committee or General GPAC, the General Plan Advisory Committee, whatever you want to call it, is a really good tool and mechanism to ensure universal buy-in in the development of the final product. And so the TAC, or the Technical Advisory Committee, is made up of representation of commissions, boards, and city staff as determined by city council. And so they'd meet probably 4 or 5 times throughout this process, but when we had sort of directional fork in the road decisions that need to be made, Technical Advisory Committee would come in and help us make those decisions from either a policy perspective or regulatory perspective. And most importantly, there is a fair representation of disciplines across the board. This is not just the city planners or community development staff having this discussion. This is the community members who represent our commissions and boards in their respective disciplines, as well as the professionals on city staff in their respective professions that help advise the team here on policy or data analytics. Overall, this is a breakdown of the cost. You'll see the $887,000 at the bottom, which is inclusive of the 10% contingency. And that specifically is meant to cover these optional tasks. Now, obviously, $80,000 won't cover all of these. The focus and the intention would be option 1, is utilizing that to decide when it's appropriate to have a community workshop, pop-up, or study session, or public hearing, either with the commission or council or other community engagement efforts. There's also an online interactive community engagement effort. And then there's remaining items that we could always come back to council for additional funding if we get down the road and we think that any of these optional items are necessary components of this land use element. We'd likely come back for an additional appropriation request. Lastly, there's one of the things I wanted to share with council is sort of the return on our investment. We are asking for a large sum of money. It's roughly $900,000, just to round up. This is a dedicated funding source. It is a funding source that comes from a 10% surcharge fee that we tie on to every building permit issuance. So every time we issue a building permit, 10% is charged and goes towards this fund itself, specifically to fund and maintain the city's land use policy documents. So general plan, we use the funds to support the housing element update. We use the funds to support the downtown specific plan, the Smoky Hollow specific plan, and the update to Smoky Hollow last year. So this fund has been critical in staff being able to keep its land use policy up to date, and it's going to be critical in this particular process here. There's a balance after the $800,000 or $900,000. There's still a balance of about $1.1 million, and we are just beginning the process of updating our general plan. And before we know it, we're going to be back before you on the housing element in about 3 or 4 years here. So we can't lose sight of that. But I wanted to talk about our return on investment. It is a dedicated funding source. Somebody made a very smart decision on establishing this surcharge or this fee several years ago. There's no white paper on dollar for dollar equivalent, and every community is different, but I thought that Burlingame was a very good example. It's a very recent general plan land use element update, relatively similar in size and configuration to El Segundo, and just overall, after their adoption of their general plan in 2018, because of the outdated infrastructure and development standards, development code, land use regulations, and really just a pent-up demand for space that was not being built, they saw a significant build-out immediately after their adoption in 2018. World's a little different now. We've survived the pandemic, and we're dealing with other sort of financial constraints and financing issues in the sort of development world. But just as an example, if you go to the bottom bullet point, they saw a dollar return of 2,270 times the investment on their general plan update. And that's realized through several different economic factors, from the development, impact fees, building fees, the sales tax, and the taxes in general that are charged, and the other sort of ripple effect impacts to the economy when people are allowed to build where there's pent-up demand for it. I'm not promising that we'll see that same type of return, but it's just an illustrative example of how important it is that we are addressing and updating our land use standards to address current economic conditions and current development demands in our community. One editorial correction I wanted to make is I input the wrong account number that we budgeted this for, and so for the record, I just wanted to make sure I put it out there that the account number that we're asking for the additional appropriation is the contractual services under 708-400-2402-6206. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Council questions, comments, concerns?
Might there be a city council liaison on that tab?
I think that's a good question, and it's entirely up to the council. I think that having 1 or 2 representatives of council is sort of a advisory role in this TAC would be helpful. It's important to point out that the TAC does not make decisions. It's purely advisory, but I would liken it to the Finance Advisory Committee, but adding a bunch of commission members and city staff members to that, where sort of previewing policy direction or policy considerations to then help sort of vet ideas before it comes to the body. So not a bad idea, certainly.
No, I think that's an excellent idea. That way there's some communication between the dais here and all of these public meetings and the input and the direction. We don't want to spend all this time and have it
And
come
money.
here to find out that we should have taken a left turn somewhere or done something different. So I think it's a great idea. Thank you for volunteering.
Oh, I mean, that was a selfish ask. I'm
happy to
missing
do it.
the
I would
study
love to
sessions,
nerd
for
out
sure.
on the general plan, but I agree. I think we should have a council member involved as a liaison just to help kind of inform council of the progress, bring ideas, and just keep things going. but I'm happy to do it if you don't want to.
Further council questions,
Both do it.
comments?
That's fine. Michael Allen would love to have us back.
All right, I'm going to move to approve an additional 87,479 and authorize city manager to execute a contract with MIG in an amount not to exceed 887,479 and to update the city's general plan land use element, as well as establish a technical advisory committee comprised of a city department, city commission, committee members, as well as council member Keldorf.
I second that emotion.
Giroux on the second. All in favor?
Can I be the alternate? Oh, there's already a motion. We gotta wait for him to vote.
I already moved. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Oh,
Yeah, I want to be in.
all right, 4-1, it passes. Pimentel on the first, Giroux on the second, Keldorf on the committee.
Worry about those 740 motions.
The mayor pro tem can stew quietly at home. All right, over to item 15. Don't go anywhere. Come on down. The next contestant. Discussion and consideration of a building permit P and development impact deferral program. Director Allen.
Okay, next item, and I'd again be remiss if I didn't thank my staff, Agnes Ho, for putting this together for me or working with me to put this together. Discussion item only, looking essentially just for some consensus and nodding heads, and if so, I'll come back to council with some formal action if there's appetite to move forward with a permit fee and development impact fee deferral program. Building permit fees for those at home, one-time fees that cover true staff time and operational costs to actually process a permit. So reviewing the permit, conducting the inspections, the software program that we run the permit, the computers, just sort of general M&O costs related to actually physically issuing a permit. Development impact fees are one-time costs that are directly tied to future impacts of development on the services that we provide to our community. If the council recalls, several years ago, in 2022, there was a major overhaul to the development impact fee schedule where we saw some of the development impact fees increase by tenfold in overall costs. And so the reason for this was because the development impact fees were not updated for several decades, or at least they were very incrementally increased over the years. And so in 2022, there was a major overhaul with a significant increase to overall development impact fees. And because of the significant impact or increase, council at the time phased out the implementation of these DIF for the development impact fees into 3 phases, where we finally, just in July of 24, were able to charge 100% of those fees. And then ongoing until it's updated again, these fees are updated each year with CPI. We collect fees generally at 3 different phases, either the entitlement phase when it goes through planning, commission, and frequently council for final sort of ratification or adoption of development permits, the actual building permit stage, so when somebody applies for building permits, and frequently we can collect fees at the certificate of occupancy or the final phase of the project. We're faced with a lot of things that are out of our control in the development world that, we see development cycles come and go, and a lot of things are out of staff's control, out of the city's control in terms of financing or lending costs or construction costs or just there's a gamut of things that we are unable to control. One of the things that we can control is the timing of when we take in fees. And so through some brainstorming with staff, knowing that we're sort of in this downturn of a development cycle, there's a queue of developments that we have in our universe that they're sort of circling and waiting for the right moment to apply. There's also entitlements that have been issued, even prior to my time here, that they've submitted for building permits, but they're not pulling the trigger, or they're waiting to submit their building permits, but they're not pulling the trigger because they're waiting for financing to be more competitive, or they're waiting for a tenant to ink an agreement so that they can actually commit and build out. through some discussions with several local developers, both here and in cities that have previously worked on, sort of soft inquired if you could defer certain fees on the front end, does that help you at all? And his short answer was yes, there's some benefits to it. It's not going to work for everybody, but for very large projects, there is a benefit to deferring certain payments and not having to pay the carry cost through the life of a construction project, which typically could be, small project, 6 months, a large project like the charges, 2 years. So that's a significant carry time that somebody has to raise the funds, finance it, and then pay interest on it until the construction is closed out. So our current municipal code is rather ambiguous of when we collect fees. It sort of just references all phases of the development cycle. It doesn't really lock us into when things are or should be collected. Other than development impact fees, it does specify that they have to be collected prior to building permit issuance. So tonight, and sort of using the recent Senate bill that was presented to council at the last meeting regarding housing, the legislation forced cities to allow the deferral of development impact fees for housing projects until C of O. And so similar structure where what staff is asking is if there's appetite to do a similar thing just for building permits in general. This is the reference to the recent amendments to the Cultural Development Fund, where we are proposing, and it just went through commission, it'll be before council on March 4th, the deferral of the development impact fee related to the Cultural Development Program till C of O. And so in light of these couple things, we're looking to do something similar for fees in general. And that would be the allowance to defer fees that are not directly tied to actual operational costs. So costs that are directly tied to actual staff time or operations, like the permit issuance software, that is real time, the inspections. We're not asking to defer those things. That's what covers our real time operational costs. But the costs that are one time but fund future investments that the city will make after the project is constructed, we're asking to defer those. We're asking if there's appetite to defer those. And just as a simple sort of example, we ran on a $100,000 development impact fee, or just fees in general, if it should be carried out between 6 to 36 months, you can kind of see the residual carry costs of a $100,000 impact fee, which is not unusual if you combine the development impact fees and the other building permit fees that are not direct costs. It's not unusual to have building permits just on issuance cost to $100,000 or more. So this is a sort of an example of if it was a large project, this would be the benefit, is somebody not having to carry, $22,000 in interest payments. So it's enough to make a nominal difference for some developments. And so we're just here asking to see if there's appetite to explore this further, develop some sort of policy to allow us to do this. Part of staff's recommendation was going to be mimicking the state legislation, where if somebody wanted to take advantage of this, we'd record a covenant, which would be a lien on the property. I have received a few phone calls and some feedback from developers who were not big fans of that provision, and suggested maybe that there's other language that there's several options if staff had to enforce upon tenant occupancy, like certificate of occupancy. There's several tools at our disposal. That's just one of them. So we could certainly adopt language that left it vague enough that we could exercise several mechanisms to force payment prior to final inspections or issuance of TCO or issuance of C of O or final C of O. So it's really sort of food for thought just to see if there's some appetite for us to develop that policy and come back with appropriate. There might be a couple text amendments and maybe a resolution just to memorialize the policy.
Council questions, comments, concerns? Councilmember Boyle, sorry.
Mr. Allen, how many cities of the 88 in LA County are doing something like this? Any of them?
I don't know off the top of my head. I could not find any.
Because it's the other legislation is pretty new, and so yeah, I mean, I applaud you. I think it's novel. It fits within our new value of embracing a little bit of risk, some calculated risk. There's not a lot here for us as a city. To me, it's total layup. So thank you for thinking creatively. I love it. Thank you.
I would recommend the lien piece stays in, just to mirror the residential piece from the state law, just because I think we can all imagine a nightmare scenario where a project faces significant overruns, it completes, the developer is out of money and can't pay, but then comes here with a chicken and the egg argument that says I cannot pay until I can get people in my building, and then we're going to sit here with this standoff that I don't think any of us want to deal with. That would be my recommendation.
My concern is the lien will make financing more difficult when you start clouding the title. And I think we're just going to, I agree with Boyles that this is a great idea. We're trying to encourage development by deferring these costs, but you're going to come back to us with the actual mechanism of which way. So whether it's a lien or you're going to withhold the certificate of occupancy or whatever it is, I look forward to seeing your creative way of how to figure that out. But I do commend you on your creativity on how can we encourage people to start building sooner, make this process a little more palatable of paying these fees that aren't really being incurred at a later time in the project. So thanks.
Councilmember Kildorf.
I'm just weighing what you have both said. I think certificate of occupancy, being able to hold that over somebody's head feels like enough of a incentive to pay fees. I don't know if the lien is necessary, but I also commend you for finding a creative solution.
All right, I think that you have direction, it sounds like, to
That's plenty,
pursue
yeah.
this and then come up with a mechanism that both perhaps doesn't muddy the title issue and cause a financing thing, but by the same token, we don't want 300 emails that say, I can't pay until I get TCO. And then we're sitting here trying to wordsmith our way around our own program. But I think that, any objections?
No,
No.
great idea.
Thank
Go
you,
forth, do
Councilman.
great things.
Thank you.
Any objections to us moving up the non-exclusive commercial franchise update? I know we've got waste haulers here. Daniel, the floor is yours.
Mr. Mayor, because I'm in the industry and some of the people on the list are actually vendors and or clients of mine, I'm going to recuse myself. Thank you.
I love an even number.
All right. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor.
Not the doors and all the way closed. Now.
Okay. All right, we're good. Good evening, Mayor, City Council members. My name is Daniel Pankow. I'm your Environmental Programs Manager. It's my pleasure to give an update on the commercial solid waste non-exclusive franchise agreements. A bit of background. The municipal code authorizes council to determine the methods by which the city manages and regulates the storage, collection, transportation, processing, and disposal of solid waste. Commercial services are currently authorized through a permitted system, and residential services are provided via an exclusive franchise agreement with EDCO. There are currently 9 companies permitted to provide commercial services within the city. These include Athens Services, EDCO, Republic Services, Ware Disposal, Waste Management, Universal Waste Systems, Holloway Rubbish Service, Key Disposal and Recycling, along with Patriot Services. The commercial service area within the city includes approximately 610 retail/industrial locations, along with 440 multifamily locations. Aside from the relatively minimal vehicle standards, there's no substantive qualifications required to obtain one of these waste hauling permits. In recent years, state regulation of solid waste management has increased significantly, highlighted by the statewide organic legislation, SB 1383. Failure to achieve and maintain compliance with these applicable state laws and regulation can subject the city to significant fines. There is increased importance to ensure that solid waste services and the providers demonstrate the ability and expertise necessary to ensure compliance with all of these new laws and regulations. The non-exclusive franchise model. It details the provider's duties and obligations, requires insurance indemnity guarantees, indemnity, I don't know why I always have trouble saying that word, indemnity guarantees, spells out agreed upon liquidated damages for failure to meet specific requirements. And the change from the permit system to the non-exclusive franchise would require a municipal code update. So here's a brief timeline. The city employed a multi-step notification and evaluation process in search for the most qualified service providers. In November of '23, the city released its RFQ. 12 haulers responded and all were deemed qualified. In April of '24, all responders were provided with a request for proposals. In June of 2024, in-person interviews were conducted with the top 9 ranked responders. In November of 2024, council gave direction to extend the non-exclusive agreements to all qualified responders. In January of this year, 10 out of the 12 responders notified us of their intention to enter into a non-exclusive agreement with the city. A bit more on the recent events. As I stated, November 5th, 2024, council gave direction to extend the non-exclusive agreements to all 12 qualified responders. In December of 2024 and January of 2025, notifications were sent out to the 12 original responders, updating them with the current information along with a draft copy of the non-exclusive franchise agreement. 10 of the 12 proposers responded with their intentions to enter into the non-exclusive agreement. Those included Athens Services, American Reclamation, EDCO, Holloway Rubbish Service, Key Disposal and Recycling, Patriot Services, Republic Services, Universal Waste Systems, Ware Disposal, and Waste Management. The proposed non-exclusive franchise agreements would be extended to all 10 proposers who expressed interest. The proposed start date for the agreement would be April 1, 2025, with a term of 2 years. All interested proposers currently operate within the city, and staff anticipates a smooth transition from the current permit system to the recommended non-exclusive franchise agreements. So today, our recommendation is to authorize the mayor to execute non-exclusive franchise agreements for the provision of commercial solid waste management services with Athens Services, American Reclamation, EDCO, Holloway Rubbish Service, Key Disposal and Recycling, Patriot Services, Republic Services, Universal Waste Systems, Ware Disposal, and Waste Management. And I'd also like to note that the next item on the agenda is regarding a change of the municipal code to accommodate the processing of these non-exclusive agreements should council go that route.
Thank you, Mr. Pankow. I
Thank
know
you.
we talked about this a great deal previously when we entertained this. Are there any further questions on the non-exclusive franchise? Councilmember Kilgore.
Just one, on the multifamily, is there a threshold of units that gets qualified as commercial?
Yeah, it's 3 or more dwelling units.
Below that, they're just on the city.
They're just,
The city pays for it. Crazy, but true.
Would anyone like to make a motion to authorize?
Sure, I will move to authorize our mayor to enter into these non-exclusive franchise agreements for provisions of commercial waste management.
That's Baldino on the first. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second for Giroux. All in favor?
Aye.
4-0, it passes.
Thank you.
City Attorney, would you do the first reading of the ordinance?
Yes, this is the next item again, but it's just to put in place the ordinance so that, for purposes of the non-exclusive commercial franchise. An ordinance amending Title V, Chapter 2 of the El Segundo Municipal Code to provide for the franchising of commercial/multifamily solid waste, recyclables, and organics collection and transportation services, removing provisions authorizing the issuance of commercial multifamily solid waste collection and transportation permits, and adding provisions for the permitting of temporary roll-off bin service providers. Is ready for introduction.
Who will introduce?
I'll introduce it.
Introduction by Baldino. That does not require a second, correct?
Correct, and this will be brought back at the council March 4th meeting for potential second read and adoption.
Thank you. Would someone like to summon Councilmember Boyles? And we'll be back to item 16, the update on the plunge.
Yes, our city engineer Cheryl Eber will give the staff report on this item, Mayor.
You are just like part of like a residential, where you're on the route and they pick it up, that's somewhat subsidized. But yeah, if it's 3 or more, you gotta pay your own way.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Tonight I will present on the construction activities at the plunge since construction began in August of 2024. As I go through the presentation, I will point out a few design changes that have led to cost increases on the project, both for construction costs but also for architectural design costs with Arcadis. Additionally, I will discuss the amendment to the facility use agreement with El Segundo Unified School District. So in August of 2024, work began first on lead and asbestos remediation throughout the building. The tiles along the pool and in the locker rooms were removed and properly disposed. They had lead in the tiles. Asbestos material was also found on the pipe insulation in locker rooms, which had to be abated. Since the asbestos was an unforeseen work as it was hidden in the walls, this led to a change order. One of the most noticeable changes to the facility thus far is the lobby entrance, where the main dividing wall in the lobby was removed. The structural columns on both sides of the lobby were structurally reinforced with the installation of fiber-reinforced polymer wrapping. And the wrapping is not shown in this picture, but later on in the presentation, I do have wrapping if you care to see it. The contractor demolished the concrete partition walls, tiles, bathroom accessories, and concrete slab in both the locker rooms. Once the existing sewer lines in the locker rooms were exposed, it was found that they were in poor condition and in need of replacement. Additionally, as shown in the photo on the right, the grade beams were encountered, which is not the structural condition that was expected from the as-built drawings. You can kind of see the grade beams there on the right picture. In addition to recalculating the structural design to ensure current structural codes are met, the architect and engineer had to redesign the sewer lines around the unexpected condition at an added design cost and construction cost. All of this work was done by hand trenching. You can't actually get equipment in there, so it was just hand trenching. The contractor then installed shower drains, floor drains, lavatory sweeps, and branching for the water closets in both locker rooms. Once inspected, the contractor backfilled, compacted the soil, and started installation of the dowels, rebar, and concrete floor. Formwork for the concrete curbs was installed in preparation for new partition walls, as shown in the photo on the right. And currently, the rough plumbing and electrical have been installed in both locker rooms. At the back of the building, the old filters were removed from the site to make way for the new ancillary spaces. The wall between the pool and the filters has been demolished, opening the space for the new bleachers and offices. After we learned that the building was not built as represented on the as-built drawings, the structural engineer analyzed the columns at the back of the building, which will be supporting the new HVAC system. The support column in the middle of the facility needed to be strengthened. And so here you can see the worker installing dowels into the existing beam to prepare for new footing support. Additionally, the photo on the left shows an existing brick holding tank from the previous pool plumbing that had to be demolished. The work associated with removing the holding tank and installing the new structural support are an added cost to the project. In both the large and small pools, a 4-foot wide trench at the bottom of the pool was hand excavated to allow for the installation of the main drain. I think I've skipped one. Hold on, I'm going to go back. The pool improvements have included removing the tiles along the wall of the pool and removing the concrete curb in the small and large pool. As you can see in the photos, this was quite a challenge where scaffolding had to be built up so the workers can work within the perimeter of the pool. The pool gutters were demolished and the contractor saw cut for the placement of new pool skimmers in the main pool. Now you can see the 4-foot wide trench at the bottom of the pool here in both the small pool and the main pool. So that was installed and it's finalized now in place. Coring for the new return lines in both pools has been completed, as well as the installation of the main drains. Under the pool deck, old vacuum and return lines from both pools were removed. For the existing water lines and deck drain lines that remain, new hanger supports have been installed to keep the plumbing adequately sloped. The contractor is now working on installing all the return lines under the deck. In the mechanical room, all of the old plumbing and water supply lines have been demolished. New water supply lines and wastewater piping have been installed. A new roof drain has also been installed, and the contractor is currently working on building up the backwash pit for the pool. In the terrace area, the old bleachers were removed. The contractor installed diagonal steel stud bracing and a steel and concrete deck. And the concrete's not actually shown in the picture on the right yet, but it's there now. Some other activities that have been going on throughout the building, just kind of all over the place, include the spalling repair to the concrete on the exterior of the building, installation of new HVAC systems, junction boxes, electrical conduit, fire alarm system, lighting systems, low voltage systems, repairs to termite damaged areas, particularly around the windows and the wooden plate on the roofing system, and seismic upgrades to the existing structure. And so here, as I mentioned before, there was FRP wrapping, the bottom right corner that's showing them actually installing the FRP wrapping. So due to the unforeseen conditions of the foundations and utilities, the original professional services agreement that was awarded to Arcadis in March of 2024 for engineering and architectural design support services is not sufficient to cover the updated structural analysis, the design of the new concrete foundations, and redesign of the underground utilities. Staff respectfully requests an amendment to the agreement with Arcadis to add $104,000 for additional services and authorize $50,000 for contingency. In 2019, the city entered into a facilities use agreement with El Segundo Unified School District. In the agreement, the city granted a license to the district to use the plunge facility for conducting school-related activities. In exchange, the district agreed to pay the lesser of 24% of the renovation cost, or $1 million, to be paid upon completion of construction. In November of 2024, just recently, the district's Board of Education approved an amendment of the facility use agreement allowing for the district to expedite the $1 million to the city. Once the agreement is executed by both parties, the transfer of funds can be made by the district to the city. And lastly, we have a Plunge project webpage where the public can go to and see pictures and project updates on our progress during construction. So the link is shown here, and I'm available for questions. Thank you.
Do we have consensus to receive and file this portion?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Questions away.
Yeah, back to slide 15. I just want to make sure I understand. On the, with the school use, is that already set? Is there a set time? Is it like what we have at the aquatic center? Is a certain time during the day? A certain amount of hours?
No, it's just to
in?
allow, I don't think the actual hours have actually been identified yet, but it's to allow them to use the.
So none of that was specified when this was agreed upon?
I don't think so.
The reason why I bring it up, Daryl, obviously, is that we're trying to figure out how to program both these pools.
Right.
So I think it would be important for us to understand what the expectations were behind that. and make sure that, obviously, they're entitled to time, but we also need to be able to schedule around it.
Yep, I agree.
Okay?
Yep.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
No, thank you for the report. On the aquatic subcommittee, we get monthly reports and updates from the plunge, including the timeline and change orders. I just went on the website, and it's very clear and concise about what's going on. Do you think this request for increase is going to carry us through the rest of the project? I mean, the foundation, yeah, you got to fix the foundation. The walls are okay. I mean, maybe the roof is going to have a question mark on it, but everything else should be, I think, like most of the skeletons we found so far, right?
I feel like we've found all the skeletons so far.
Yeah.
I'm really hopeful that this would carry us through, but
Okay.
I just don't know what we're going to encounter.
Okay. Yeah, I toured it with Councilmember Giroux. A lot of progress has been made over there, and thank you for the report.
Yeah, no problem.
It is remarkable when you discover something is not built as designed, that the part that wouldn't be built as designed is the part they started with.
Yeah, the foundation.
Right? The foundation.
Wasn't there.
Like, it wasn't the roof. You know, wasn't the office. It was, they started this project like, we're just doing this way different. That's what was it, WPA? Who was it? That's, I mean, can you imagine those guys? Like 7 Okies sitting around being like, I know how to do this better. All right. Can I get a motion to authorize the city manager to execute an amendment to the professional service agreement with Arcadis for $104,000 in construction administration support in construction phase and authorize an additional $50,000 for contingency?
So moved.
Giroux so moved on the first.
Second.
Boyle second. All those in favor?
Aye.
A motion to that's 5-0, and a motion to authorize the city manager to execute an amendment to the facilities use agreement number 5586 between El Segundo Unified and the city of El Segundo to expedite the district's $1 million contribution.
I so moved.
Giroux on the first.
I'll second.
Keldorf second. All those in favor?
Aye.
5-0. Where'd you go? Oh, well, thank you, Cheryl.
She's over there.
Oh, Dan. All right, committees, commissions, boards, presentations. We don't have any of those. Reports, city clerk.
I attended the nuts and bolts at the CCAC training a couple weeks ago, and it was very, very valuable. I learned so much about what I have to learn. And one of the most important things is that I need to perfect my resting clerk face. So, but it was very, very valuable, and I'm very happy that my entire staff has taken part in that training, and I look forward to the next thing that they have offered.
Did they explain why we can do almost all of our Form 700s on one database, but not all of them?
Not there, but I have taken subsequent training, and it's because you're special.
Unbelievable. Council member reports. Councilmember Keldorf.
I will say I am halfway through a 10-week community police academy session, and it is free to El Segundo residents and non-residents alike, put on by our police department to give you a better idea of what goes into policing, and I highly recommend it. I think last week we had SWAT and K9 presentations, which was kind of topical. And I can say I'm very grateful that we have the police department that we do. And evidence of that, yesterday's incident on Penn Street came to a peaceful and professional resolution. And I've learned a lot, and I understand how that came to pass. And I'm very appreciative of our police department and their willingness to really show us what's kind of happening behind the scenes. Highly recommend. And Miss Baldino's fun to have next to me in the front row where she makes me sit every session.
She's a good student.
She is a very good student.
Thank you, Councilmember Keldorf. Councilmember Giroux.
Nothing for me this week, thanks.
Councilmember Boyles.
Nothing for me.
Mayor Pro Tem Baldino.
Quick congratulations to some of our high school teams who are going through the CIF championship. I caught the end of the girls' water polo game. Came up short, but had a fantastic season. And our boys' high school soccer beat Redondo. And so they're moving on. So congratulations and go Eagles.
And I will spare you all the gory details of all of our regional efforts. Most of the sanitation stuff is coming up later in the month. I know we spoke last time, Elias, about the new matching fund policy for some of our infrastructure and transportation projects. We do have COG General Assembly coming up in March, but that is all for me. City Attorney.
Just briefly, I will apologize for my contribution to the confusion earlier about the contracting method and the fact that we were using a system which was based upon the overall risk and not just on driving. So again, my apologies for letting that drag on for 5 or 10 minutes. Thank you.
That's right. We like a good soliloquy, especially when it doesn't really impact things. City Manager.
Yes, Mayor, just a couple things. First of all, I'd like, regarding the last item with the plunge, I want to extend a thank you to new school superintendent Jason Johnson for supporting our efforts to expedite that $1 million payment. He, in my meetings with him, he was very supportive of taking that to the Board of Education, and I thank him for that. Just real briefly on Hyperion, it's kind of a quiet couple weeks where we had AQMD received approximately 19 odor complaints the last couple of weeks and did issue a notice of violation on February 14th related to odors. So it was kind of a quiet couple of weeks at Hyperion. That's really all I have to. We are drafting a letter in anticipation of the next board hearing, which isn't until August, so we will certainly get a letter out again asking them to continue the abatement orders at that time. That concludes my comments.
Yeah, City Manager, there's actually a couple quick thank yous
Sure.
I forgot to include. One, I wanted to congratulate Continental. I know several of us were at the Cinema West reopening to have a theater in town. That was magnificent. But I think that points to, we just have some of these really, really solid corporate citizens who really have the overall community in mind. I had a wonderful interchange with Natalie Myers at L'Oreal, who, between them and Raytheon, always volunteer spots. If we have corporate events, nonprofit events, things like that, it's just been a real treat being in this seat to see how people just volunteer their time for it. And I would be remiss if I did not include that. So with that, we are adjourned.